Security didn't rush her. No one had to. Because the moment Angela Carter stepped onto the wedding lawn, people instinctively moved away. Chairs stayed empty. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Eyes followed her, but never met hers. She wasn't loud. She wasn't disruptive. She wasn't asking for anything. She was calm, composed, and completely alone. At the head table, Charlotte Robinson noticed immediately. Her jaw tightened. Her smile stiffened. "This is a private event," she hissed to the wedding planner, lowering her voice just enough to sound dangerous. "Who is she? And why is she here?" The planner hesitated. Charlotte leaned closer, her tone sharpening. "Get her out, now, or I promise you, you'll have your ass handed to you before this ceremony even starts." Across the lawn, Angela adjusted her dress and stood still as guests stared, judged, and quietly decided she didn't belong. No invitation was checked, no explanation was offered, just silence. Then, the groom appeared. Howard Robinson stepped forward, scanning the crowd until his eyes landed on her. His expression changed. Not confusion, not anger, recognition. The music softened. Conversations died. Even the breeze seemed to pause. And in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, he said her name, Angela Carter. That was the moment everything changed. Because the woman they ignored was the reason this wedding existed at all. If you've ever been judged without being known, tap like and hit subscribe. Your support means everything to us. Thank you, God bless you, and stay with us, because what happens next changes everything. Quick question after watching to the end, answer this. When you finally have power, do you use it to punish or to correct? I'll be in the comment section. The wedding was supposed to be perfect. White chairs lined the lawn in flawless rows, facing the ocean where sunlight scattered across the water like broken glass. Crystal glasses clinked, softly as servers moved with rehearsed precision. Laughter floated through the air, light, effortless, expensive. This was the Robinson wedding, and everyone there knew it. Old money, old names, old power. Which was why the moment Angela Carter stepped onto the grass, the atmosphere shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, just subtly. A woman halfway through a laugh stopped mid-breath. A man reaching for champagne hesitated, then slowly set the glass down. Conversations thinned, then fractured, then dissolved entirely. People noticed her. And then, without a word, made room away from her. Angela felt it instantly. The empty space, the quiet recoil, the invisible wall forming around her as she walked deeper onto the lawn. She had expected it, prepared for it. Still, it landed heavy in her chest. She stopped near the edge of the seating area and smoothed the front of her dress. Navy blue, elegant, simple. Nothing that screamed for attention. Nothing that should have threatened anyone. Yet heads turned, eyes lingered, judgments were made in silence. Who invited her? Does she belong here? Why is she so calm? Angela kept her chin lifted and her shoulders back. Years of discipline had taught her how to stand still under pressure, how to let silence speak for her, how not to react. But even discipline couldn't stop the sting. At the head table, Charlotte Robinson noticed. She had been laughing moments earlier, one manicured hand resting on her champagne flute, her posture flawless, her smile perfected by decades of social training. But the instant her eyes landed on Angela, something hardened behind them. Her smile froze. She leaned toward the wedding planner, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Who is that woman?" The planner followed her gaze and stiffened. I'm not sure, Mrs. Robinson." Charlotte's fingers tightened around her glass. "This is a private event." "Yes, ma'am." Charlotte didn't blink. "Then why is she standing on my lawn?" The planner swallowed. "Perhaps she's with one of the—" Charlotte cut her off. "No one I know dresses like that without a reason, and no one wanders into a Robinson wedding by accident." Her eyes narrowed. "Get her out." The planner hesitated. That hesitation cost her. Charlotte leaned closer, her smile returning, but now it was thin, controlled, dangerous. "Do not embarrass me today," she whispered. "If that woman is still here in 5 minutes, you will personally explain to me why. And trust me, you don't want to do that." Across the lawn, Angela felt the shift before she saw it. The looks had sharpened. Less curious now, more hostile. A server slowed as he passed her, eyes widening for just a fraction of a second, then quickly looking away. Another stopped entirely, staring as if he'd seen a ghost. Angela recognized that look. They know me, or at least, they knew something. She took a slow breath and stayed where she was. Leaving would be easy. Staying took resolve. A woman in pearls leaned toward her husband and whispered, not quietly enough, "Is she lost?" He frowned. "This isn't that kind of wedding." Another voice joined in. "Probably someone looking for a payout. You know how these things go." Angela didn't respond. She didn't flinch. She let the words slide past her like wind, but Charlotte heard everything, and it fueled her. "This is unbelievable," Charlotte muttered, standing. "I will not have some stranger disrupt my son's wedding." She began moving toward Angela, heels clicking with purpose, when suddenly the music shifted. Not the ceremonial music. Something softer, transitional. Heads turned toward the aisle. The groom had arrived. Howard Robinson stepped into view, adjusting his cufflinks as he spoke quietly with his best man. He looked composed, handsome, confident, until his eyes lifted, until he saw her. Howard stopped walking. His best man took 2 more steps before realizing he was alone. "Howard," he whispered. Howard didn't answer, because the moment his gaze locked onto Angela Carter, the world narrowed to a single point. Time slowed. The noise of the wedding faded to a dull hum. Memories he'd spent years burying surged forward without warning. Her voice, her face, the night everything nearly fell apart. His breath caught. Angela felt it too, the shift, the weight of his stare. She looked up. Their eyes met. For a split second, neither of them moved. Recognition flashed across Howard's face, raw and unmistakable. Not confusion, not anger. Recognition. A ripple moved through the crowd. People sensed something, couldn't name it, but felt it all the same. Charlotte followed Howard's gaze. Her stomach dropped. "Howard," she called sharply, "what are you doing?" Howard didn't hear her. He took 1 step forward, then another. The whispers grew louder. "That's the groom. Why is he staring at her? Do they know each other?" Howard stopped again, his voice steady but unmistakably changed. And then, loud enough for everyone to hear, he spoke. "Angela Carter." The name cut through the wedding like a blade. Silence crashed down, and nothing would ever be the same again. For 3 full seconds after Howard said her name, no one moved. It wasn't the comfortable kind of silence, the kind meant for vows or prayer. It was sharp, exposed, unforgiving. Angela felt it press against her skin like heat. Whispers rippled through the crowd, low and urgent. "She knows the groom. Did he just say her name? How does she know him?" Charlotte Robinson turned slowly, her face draining of color. "What did you say?" she asked, forcing a smile that no longer reached her eyes. Howard didn't answer right away. His gaze remained locked on Angela, as if everyone else had vanished. His hands clenched at his sides, knuckles whitening beneath the tailored sleeves of his tuxedo. Charlotte stepped closer to him, lowering her voice. "Howard," she said sharply, "who is that woman?" Angela held her breath. This was the moment she had prepared for and dreaded. Howard swallowed. "She's someone I know." The pause before his words landed like a crack in glass. Charlotte's head snapped back toward Angela, eyes narrowing. "You know her?" "Yes." The word echoed louder than it should have. Charlotte's composure fractured. She laughed once, short and sharp. That's impossible. Howard finally looked at his mother. It's not. The guest leaned in now, drawn by instinct to unfolding drama. Phones remained discreetly lowered, but hands hovered near pockets. Charlotte straightened her posture, reclaiming control the only way she knew how, publicly. Well, she said, turning to the crowd with a practiced smile. This is awkward, isn't it? A few nervous laughs followed. Charlotte continued, voice rising just enough to carry. I apologize if anyone feels confused. This wedding has been meticulously planned, and we did not expect uninvited guests. Angela felt dozens of eyes burn into her. Charlotte's smile sharpened. Howard, sweetheart, if you know this woman, perhaps you'd like to explain why she's standing alone like a lost guest instead of sitting where she belongs. Howard hesitated. That hesitation told Charlotte everything she needed to know. She stepped forward, closer to Angela now, too close. And you, Charlotte said, her tone turning icy. Since my son seems distracted, I'll ask directly. Who invited you? Angela met her gaze calmly. I didn't need an invitation. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Charlotte's lips parted in disbelief. Excuse me? I came because I was asked, Angela replied evenly. Charlotte laughed again, louder this time. By whom? Angela didn't answer. The silence stretched, and Charlotte pounced. Ah, she said, nodding as if a puzzle piece had clicked into place. So that's it. You show up uninvited, stand in the middle of my son's wedding, and expect everyone to pretend this is normal. Her voice grew louder with every word. You know, some people mistake confidence for entitlement. Angela's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. Charlotte circled her like a predator. Do you have any idea how hard we worked to keep this event respectable? A woman near the front whispered, This is so inappropriate. Another muttered, She should leave. Charlotte stopped directly in front of Angela. I will ask you one last time, she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Why are you here? Angela took a slow breath. Because someone here asked me to witness something. Charlotte scoffed. Witness what? Angela's eyes flicked just once toward Howard. That was all it took. Charlotte followed her gaze. Her face hardened instantly. No, Charlotte said flatly. Absolutely not. She turned to the nearest security guard. Remove her. Now. The guard hesitated. Mrs. Robinson. Now, Charlotte snapped, before she disrupts this wedding any further. The guard stepped toward Angela. Howard stepped forward at the same time. Stop. The single word cut through the noise. Charlotte spun around. Howard, what are you doing? Howard's voice shook, not with fear, but with conflict. She's not causing a scene. Charlotte's eyes blazed. She is the scene. Angela felt the weight of the moment bearing down on her. This was where it could spiral, where she could be dragged out, humiliated, dismissed as nothing more than an inconvenience. She had promised herself she wouldn't speak. But silence, she realized, had become a weapon used against her. Before she could stop herself, she spoke. I'll leave, Angela said calmly. If that's what you want. Charlotte smiled, in victory. Finally, some sense, Angela continued, her voice steady. But before I do, I want to ask one question. Charlotte rolled her eyes. Make it quick. Angela turned, not to Charlotte, but to Howard. Do you remember what you promised me? She asked quietly. Howard's face went pale. The crowd froze. Charlotte frowned. Promised you what? Howard didn't answer, because in that moment, he remembered everything. And the truth, long buried, long avoided, was seconds away from tearing through the wedding like a storm. The question hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Do you remember what you promised me? Howard didn't answer. He couldn't, because in that single sentence, the past rushed back with brutal clarity, The courthouse hallway, the fluorescent lights, the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears as everything he had built threatened to collapse. Charlotte noticed immediately. The way her son's shoulders stiffened, the way his eyes dropped, the way his silence stretched too long. "What promise?" Charlotte demanded, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. "Howard, what is she talking about?" Howard opened his mouth, then closed it. Angela watched him carefully. She wasn't angry, not anymore. She had burned through that emotion years ago. What remained was resolve and something heavier, patience. Around them, the wedding had stopped being a celebration. Servers hovered near the edges of the lawn, pretending to adjust trays that didn't need adjusting. A photographer lowered his camera, sensing that whatever was unfolding wasn't meant to be captured yet. And then, quietly, someone recognized her. It started with a server. He was older, hair touched with gray, hands steady from decades of service. He passed behind Angela, carrying a tray of champagne, and froze mid-step. His eyes widened. "No," he whispered under his breath. Angela didn't turn. She didn't need to. She heard the change. In his breathing, he set the tray down slowly, deliberately, as if afraid of making noise. "Miss Carter," he said softly. Charlotte snapped around. "Excuse me." The server swallowed. I'm sorry, ma'am. I just..." Charlotte stepped toward him. "Why are you speaking to her?" The man hesitated, glancing at Angela, then at Howard. "I remember her," he said quietly. "From years ago." A murmur rippled through the staff. Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "Remember her from where?" The server cleared his throat. "From before, when things weren't the way they are now." "That makes no sense," Charlotte snapped. "This estate has been in our family for a long time," the server finished carefully. "Yes, ma'am, I know." Angela turned slightly now, meeting his eyes. She gave him a small nod. "Thank you," she said. The man straightened, as if relieved. Charlotte's voice rose. "Absolutely not. You will not encourage this. Nonsense. Get back to work." The server hesitated. Then, slowly, he removed his serving gloves. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Robinson," he said, "but I can't pretend I don't recognize her." Gasps rippled through the guests. Charlotte stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. "You're going to side with her?" The man's voice trembled, but he didn't back down. "I'm just telling the truth." Angela felt something shift, not loudly, but unmistakably. Another staff member stepped forward, a woman from the catering team, eyes wide, voice barely above a whisper. "She used to come here," the woman said, "a long time ago." Charlotte spun. "Enough." A third voice joined in. "I remember her father." Charlotte's head snapped toward the sound. A groundskeeper stood near the hedge, cap in his hands, posture rigid. "He used to walk this property every morning," the man said. "Talk to us like we mattered." Charlotte's face flushed red. "You are all out of line." Angela closed her eyes briefly. She hadn't planned this, hadn't wanted it to unravel like this, but truth has a way of finding oxygen. Charlotte turned back to Angela, her voice shaking with fury. "You planned this," she hissed. "You planted yourself here to stir up old stories." Angela met her gaze steadily. "I didn't plant anything." Charlotte laughed, brittle and loud. "You think a few confused employees are going to rewrite reality?" Howard finally spoke. "Mom," he said quietly. Charlotte whipped around. "No, do not mom me. This woman is embarrassing our family." Howard's jaw tightened. "You're embarrassing yourself." The words landed hard. Charlotte stared at him in disbelief. "After everything I've done for you?" Angela felt the tension snap tighter. Howard turned toward her, his voice lower now. "You shouldn't have come." Angela nodded once. "I know." Charlotte's eyes widened. "So you admit it. This was a mistake." Angela looked past her, scanning the faces in the crowd, The ones whispering, the ones watching, the ones suddenly unsure. I came because I was tired of pretending what happened never happened, she said calmly. I came because silence helped protect a lie. Charlotte's breath caught. What lie? Angela's eyes flicked to Howard again. The crowd followed her gaze. Charlotte felt it then. Fear. Real fear. What did you do? Charlotte asked her son, voice barely holding together. Howard swallowed hard. Before he could answer, a voice cut through the tension. Howard. It was the officiant, standing near the altar, confusion written across his face. We're running behind. Charlotte snapped. Give us a minute. The officiant hesitated, then nodded, retreating. Charlotte turned back to Angela, lowering her voice. Whatever you think you're doing, stop. Angela stepped closer, her tone steady but unyielding. You raised him to believe consequences could be avoided, she said quietly. You raised him to believe someone else would always clean up the mess. Charlotte recoiled as if struck. Howard closed his eyes, because Angela wasn't wrong, and the promise he'd made, years ago, was no longer something he could hide from. Howard hadn't thought about that night in years. Not really. He'd trained himself not to. But standing there, his wedding paused, his mother trembling with rage, Angela Carter only a few feet away. The memory surged back with brutal force, flashing red and blue lights, cold pavement, the taste of blood and panic in his mouth. Angela saw it in his eyes. She'd seen that look before. It was the look of a man cornered by his own past. Howard, Charlotte said sharply, say something. End this. He didn't, because for the first time in his adult life, he couldn't pretend the past was buried. Angela spoke softly, not to accuse, but to remind. You don't have to explain, she said. I already know. Charlotte laughed nervously. Know what? This is ridiculous. But Howard was no longer listening to his mother. He was somewhere else. 8 years earlier, the rain had been relentless that night, pounding the windshield as Howard drove far too fast down an unfamiliar road. He had been angry, drunk on entitlement, certain nothing could touch him. Until something did. The impact was sudden, violent, metal screaming against metal. Howard remembered the sound before anything else. He remembered crawling out of the car, shaking, heart racing, staring at the twisted wreckage as reality crashed down on him. Another car, another body. He remembered dropping to his knees, whispering, "This can't be happening. This can't be happening." And then, sirens. Angela had been there, not by chance, by responsibility. She'd been working late that night, already exhausted, already stretched thin. When she arrived at the scene, she took everything in instantly. The damage, the fear, the unmistakable signs of intoxication. She recognized Howard, not by name, by privilege. She saw it in his posture. His panic wasn't fear of what he'd done. It was fear of consequences. You need to breathe, she told him calmly. He looked at her like she was his last lifeline. I didn't mean to, he kept saying. I swear, I didn't mean to. Angela had believed him, but belief didn't erase facts. The other driver survived, but barely. Charges were inevitable. Prison was possible. Howard remembered sitting across from Angela later, hands shaking, voice breaking. My mother can't know, he'd said. She'll destroy everything to protect me. Angela had studied him quietly. Tell me the truth, she said. He did. And when the system began to tilt, as it often does, Angela saw it clearly. Calls were made, pressure applied, evidence softened, the story reshaped. She had a choice: expose the truth fully, or intervene to keep an already broken system from crushing everyone involved. Angela chose the harder path. She testified, not falsely, but strategically. She absorbed blame that wasn't hers to bear, took responsibility that shifted the outcome. Howard walked away with probation, rehabilitation, a second chance. Angela walked away with consequences, a stalled career, whispers, doors quietly closing, and a promise. "You'll do better," she'd told him that day. "You'll live a life that makes this sacrifice mean something." Howard had nodded, sworn it. "I promise," he'd said. "I'll never forget what you did." The memory snapped back to the present. Howard opened his eyes. Charlotte was staring at him, confused, furious. "What is she talking about?" she demanded. "Howard, answer me." He looked at Angela, then at his mother, and for the first time, he didn't shield the truth. "She's the reason I'm standing here," he said quietly. The crowd leaned in. Charlotte scoffed. "That's absurd." Howard's voice cracked. "I should have gone to prison." The words landed like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the guests. Charlotte staggered back a step. "What?" Howard continued, his voice gaining strength with every word. 8 years ago, I nearly destroyed my life, and someone else's." Angela remained still. "I was drunk, reckless, entitled," he said, "and she stepped in when she didn't have to." Charlotte's face went pale. "Howard, stop." "She protected me," he said, "not because I deserved it, but because she believed people could change." The crowd was silent now. Angela felt the weight lift slightly from her chest. She hadn't come for this moment, but she wasn't running from it either. Howard turned fully toward her. "I broke my promise," he said. "I let my family forget. I let myself forget." Angela met his gaze. "You're remembering now." Charlotte shook her head in disbelief. "This is insanity." Angela finally spoke, her voice steady and unmistakable. "I didn't come to ruin your wedding," she said. "I came to see whether the man I believed in still existed." Howard swallowed hard, and the answer, whatever it was, would change everything. For a moment after Howard spoke, no one breathed. Not the guests, not the staff, not even the ocean behind them. Charlotte Robinson was the first to recover. She straightened slowly, like a general regaining command after a surprise strike. Her shock hardened into something sharper, dangerous. "That is enough," she said, voice ringing across the lawn. She laughed once, loudly, deliberately. "Do you hear yourselves?" A few guests shifted uncomfortably. "My son is emotional," Charlotte continued, turning to the crowd. "It's his wedding day. Stress does strange things to people. And this woman," she gestured toward Angela without looking at her, "has clearly taken advantage of that." Angela felt the temperature change. Charlotte wasn't retreating. She was attacking. "This is a manipulation," Charlotte went on. "A calculated performance designed to humiliate my family in front of our friends." Murmurs spread. "That makes sense," someone whispered. "Why bring this up now?" Another agreed. Charlotte seized the momentum. "If any of what she's claiming were true," she said sharply, "why wait 8 years? Why show up today of all days?" She turned directly to Angela now, eyes blazing. "Unless this was planned." Angela didn't answer. Her silence worked against her this time. Charlotte stepped closer, voice dropping with surgical precision. "You wanted an audience." A woman in the second row leaned toward her husband. "That's suspicious." Charlotte nodded as if hearing them. "Exactly, this isn't justice. It's revenge." Howard stepped forward. "Mom," Charlotte raised a hand. "No, I protected you once. I'll protect you again." She turned back to the crowd, her voice smooth, convincing. "Think about it. Someone shows up uninvited, stirs confusion, makes accusations with no evidence." Angela finally spoke. "I never accused anyone." Charlotte smiled coldly. "You don't have to. You let implication do the work." The crowd murmured louder now. Angela felt it, the shift, sympathy draining, doubt creeping in. A man near the aisle crossed his arms. "Why now?" another woman whispered. "This feels staged." Charlotte pressed harder. She's exploiting guilt, Charlotte said, and you all know how easy it is to manipulate guilt. Angela's chest tightened. She'd known this would happen. Truth without proof was fragile. Charlotte leaned in close, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for Angela. You should have stayed gone. Angela met her eyes. I never left, Charlotte recoiled, then laughed sharply. Listen to her. Cryptic, dramatic. This is exactly what people do when they want attention. Howard looked around, panic creeping into his expression. This is my fault, he said quietly. I should have spoken sooner. Charlotte snapped toward him. You should stop talking. A server accidentally dropped a fork. The clatter echoed like a gunshot. Angela realized something then. The crowd didn't want truth. They wanted comfort. And Charlotte was offering it. A woman near the back spoke up. If this is real, why hasn't anyone else come forward? Another added, why is she the only one? Charlotte nodded approvingly. Exactly. Angela's hands trembled slightly. She clasped them together, steadying herself. She could end this. She could say it all. But doing so would cost more than she'd ever paid before. Charlotte saw the hesitation and struck. You see? She said. She has nothing. Howard turned to Angela, desperation in his eyes. Please, say something. Angela hesitated. Then she shook her head. Not yet. Charlotte smiled triumphantly. Security, she said calmly. Escort her out. The guard stepped forward again, this time without hesitation. Howard stepped in front of them. No, Charlotte's voice cracked. Howard, move. I won't. The guards froze, unsure. Charlotte's composure finally fractured. This woman is destroying our family. Angela stepped back slowly, heart pounding. This was it. This was where she would lose the room. Then, a voice cut through the chaos. Mrs. Robinson. Everyone turned. It was the officiant. His face was pale. There's someone here asking for you. Charlotte scoffed. Tell them to wait. The officiant swallowed. He says he won't. Charlotte frowned. Who is he? The officiant lowered his voice. A man named Marcus Lee. Angela's breath caught. Howard stiffened. Charlotte frowned deeper. I don't know anyone by that name. Angela closed her eyes. Marcus Lee, the other driver, the man whose life had nearly ended that night, and the one person Charlotte never expected to see. The officiant added quietly, he says he was invited by Angela Carter. The crowd fell silent. Angela opened her eyes, and for the first time, Charlotte looked afraid. The name lingered in the air like a bad echo. Marcus Lee. Charlotte Robinson blinked once, then laughed sharply. This is absurd, she said. Anyone can claim a name. But Angela didn't laugh. Howard didn't breathe, because they both knew exactly who Marcus Lee was. Bring him here, Howard said quietly. Charlotte spun toward her son. Howard, absolutely not. The officiant hesitated, caught between authority and instinct. He's already on his way, he said. He walked past security. Charlotte's face flushed red. Then security failed, again. Before anyone could respond, footsteps approached from behind the rows of white chairs. Slow, uneven. The crowd parted instinctively as a man stepped into view. Marcus Lee looked older than his years. A faint limp slowed his stride. One hand rested in the pocket of his jacket, gripping something unseen. Angela felt her throat tighten. She hadn't seen him in years. He stopped a few feet away from her and nodded once. Angela, she nodded back. Marcus. The sound of his voice, steady, calm, sent a ripple through the guests. Charlotte stared at him, assessing. And who exactly are you supposed to be? Marcus didn't look at her. He looked at Howard. You don't remember me, Marcus said. But I remember you. Howard's face drained of color. I was in the other car. Gasps erupted across the lawn. Charlotte staggered back. This is a setup, she snapped. An elaborate setup. Marcus finally turned to her, eyes steady. I spent 6 months in the hospital. Another year learning how to walk without pain. The murmurs grew louder. Charlotte raised her voice. You expect us to believe this man just happened to show up today? Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. I didn't just show up, he said. I was invited. He held the paper up. An invitation. Angela's handwriting. Charlotte scoffed. Anyone can fake handwriting. Marcus nodded. You're right. So I brought something else. He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a thick envelope. Howard stepped forward instinctively. Marcus raised a hand. Let me finish. He turned to the crowd now, voice carrying. For years, I wondered why the case ended the way it did, why evidence disappeared, why the narrative shifted. Charlotte's lips trembled. This is defamation. Marcus ignored her. I lost my job, my marriage, my mobility, he continued, but I survived. He looked at Angela, because someone made sure I did. Angela felt tears threaten, but she held them back. Marcus opened the envelope and removed several documents, medical reports, police records, court transcripts. I requested these last year, he said, because I needed to understand. Charlotte lunged forward. This is illegal. Howard stepped between them. Mom, stop. Marcus's voice hardened. According to these records, someone intervened on my behalf. Someone made sure my medical bills were covered anonymously. Charlotte froze. Marcus continued, eyes never leaving her face. Someone made sure the charges didn't disappear entirely, just enough accountability to keep the truth from being erased. The crowd was silent. And that someone, Marcus said, turning toward Angela, was her. Angela finally spoke. I didn't want your life destroyed to protect his. Charlotte shook her head violently. No, this is twisted. Marcus turned back to Charlotte. Your family offered me money, quiet money, to disappear. A collective gasp. Charlotte screamed, That's a lie. Marcus nodded slowly. I refused. Howard's voice cracked. Mom, did you? Charlotte snapped toward him. I protected you. The words echoed, raw and exposed. Angela stepped forward. You protected him, she said softly, at everyone else's expense. Charlotte's shoulders sagged for the first time. Marcus looked at the guests. I didn't come for revenge, he said. I came because I was tired of pretending silence was justice. Angela met his gaze. Thank you. Marcus nodded once more. Then he turned to Howard. You got a second chance, Marcus said. I hope you earned it. Howard's eyes filled with tears. I'm trying to, he whispered. Charlotte sank into a chair, hands trembling. The illusion was gone. The wedding had become something else entirely. Angela looked around at the faces, some ashamed, some stunned, some still searching for excuses. This was never about humiliation, she said calmly. It was about truth. She turned to Charlotte. And whether you could face it. Charlotte didn't answer. She couldn't, because for the first time in her life, there was nowhere left to hide. No one noticed Howard move at first. The crowd was still frozen in the aftermath of Marcus Lee's words. Faces were pale. Glasses sat untouched in trembling hands. The illusion of celebration had collapsed, leaving behind something raw and exposed. Howard stepped toward the altar. The officiant looked at him, confused. Howard didn't answer. He reached for the microphone mounted on the stand, the one meant for vows, for promises, for happily ever afters. Charlotte's head snapped up. Howard, don't you dare. He lifted the microphone anyway. The small sound of feedback echoed across the lawn, sharp and unforgiving. Every conversation died. Instantly. Howard took a breath. His hands were shaking now. He didn't try to hide it. I need everyone to hear this, he said. Charlotte stood abruptly. This is not happening. Howard turned toward her, his voice steadying. It already is. He looked out at the guests, at the faces that had laughed earlier, whispered, judged. Then he looked at Angela, and for the first time that day, he didn't look away. Years ago, Howard began, I made a decision that should have ended my future. A ripple moved through the crowd. I was drunk, I was reckless, and I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Charlotte shook her head, whispering urgently, Stop. Please. Howard continued, I should have gone to prison. Gasps broke out openly now. But I didn't, he said, because one person believed that accountability didn't have to mean destruction. He turned fully toward Angela, lifting the microphone slightly higher. Say her name. Someone whispered. Howard did. Angela Carter. The sound of it, spoken clearly, publicly, hit like a bell. Angela felt the moment settle into her bones. Years of silence cracked open all at once. Howard swallowed hard. She took responsibility when she didn't have to. She stood in a system that favors people like me, and she made it fair. Charlotte cried out, Howard, you're humiliating this family. Howard's voice broke, but he didn't stop. No, I'm telling the truth. He faced the crowd again. While my life went on, college, career, this wedding, hers stalled. Doors closed. People whispered, and she never once came looking for credit. Angela closed her eyes. This was never why she came, but she let it happen. Howard turned to Marcus. And while my family tried to bury the past, she made sure the man I hurt survived. Marcus nodded silently. Charlotte collapsed back into her chair, hands covering her mouth. Howard looked at his bride. Fear, confusion, heartbreak flickering across her face. I should have told you sooner, he said quietly. You deserve the truth. She nodded slowly, tears spilling over. Yes, she whispered. I did. Howard turned back to Angela. I promised you I would live a life worthy of what you did, he said. And I failed you. Angela stepped forward at last. Her voice was calm, but it carried. You didn't fail me, she said. You failed yourself. The words landed heavier than any accusation. Howard nodded, tears falling freely now. Angela looked out at the guests, at the people who had avoided her, dismissed her, labeled her. This, she said, gesturing around her, is what happens when silence is rewarded and truth is delayed. No one interrupted. Not Charlotte, not the crowd, not even the ocean. Angela continued, I didn't come to destroy a wedding. I came to see whether truth still had a place here. She turned back to Howard. And now I have my answer. Charlotte stood suddenly, her voice cracking. You enjoyed this, didn't you? Standing there while we fall apart. Angela met her gaze. No, she said softly. I endured it. Charlotte recoiled as if struck. Howard lowered the microphone slowly. The officiant stood frozen, unsure whether to speak or flee. Angela took one final look at the altar, the flowers, the vows that would never sound the same again. Then she turned away. She took 2 steps before Howard spoke again. Angela, he said. She stopped, but didn't turn. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, but I needed the world to know who you are. Angela paused. Then she turned back, just once. You don't owe me redemption, she said. You owe the truth consistency. She walked away from the altar. And for the first time that day, the crowd didn't move away from her. They moved aside. The silence Angela left behind was heavier than the accusations that came before it. She walked slowly, heels sinking into the grass, each step measured, not because she was unsure, but because she refused to run from a truth she had finally allowed into the open. Behind her, the wedding stood suspended in disbelief. No music, no laughter, no ceremony, just consequences. Charlotte Robinson remained seated, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on nothing at all. The woman who had commanded the room with whispers and threats now looked small, exposed in a way money could never fix. Guests avoided her gaze. Some looked at Angela with something new now. Not suspicion, respect. Howard stood at the altar alone, microphone still warm in his hand. His bride remained beside him, gripping her bouquet so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "This isn't how it was supposed to go," she whispered. Howard nodded. "I know." The officiant approached carefully. "Do you want to continue?" Howard looked around, at the empty spaces where confidence had once lived, at the guests who no longer knew where to stand, at his mother, who had taught him that image mattered more than truth. "No," he said quietly. "Not like this." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. Howard stepped down from the platform and followed Angela. "Angela, wait." She stopped near the edge of the lawn, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond the gates. Howard came to a halt a few feet behind her, unsure now where he was allowed to stand. "I know you didn't come for this," he said. Angela didn't turn. "No, I didn't." "I owe you more than words." She nodded once. "Yes, you do." Howard hesitated. "What do you want?" Angela finally faced him. The question had followed her for years. What did she want? Not revenge, not recognition, not apologies dressed up as absolution. "I want accountability," she said simply, "and I want consistency." Howard frowned. "Explain." "You stood up today," Angela continued. "That matters, but truth doesn't mean much if it only shows up when the room is watching." Howard lowered his gaze. "You're right." Behind them, Charlotte's voice broke the moment. "This is over," she snapped, pushing herself to her feet. "We're done entertaining this humiliation." Several guests flinched. Angela turned slowly. Charlotte's composure had cracked completely now. "You've had your moment," Charlotte said bitterly. "You exposed us. Congratulations." Angela met her gaze steadily. "You did that yourself." Charlotte laughed hollowly. "You think this ends here? People forget." Angela took a breath. "Some do." Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "And some don't?" Angela's voice softened, but only slightly. "Some learn." Charlotte scoffed. "From you?" Angela stepped closer. "From today." The crowd watched in silence. Angela addressed them now, not with anger, but clarity. "You saw how quickly assumptions formed," she said. "How easily silence became permission." No one spoke. "And how difficult it was to hear the truth once it threatened comfort." Several guests looked down. "I was shunned not because of what I did," Angela continued, "but because of what you believed I represented." Charlotte clenched her jaw. Angela turned back to her. "You asked who I was." Charlotte swallowed. Angela answered quietly. "I'm the person who decided power should be used responsibly." Charlotte looked away. Howard stepped forward again. "What happens now?" Angela considered the question carefully. This was the choice she had wrestled with for years. She could pursue consequences, legal, social, permanent. She could dismantle everything Charlotte had built on denial and control. The room seemed to hold its breath. Angela looked at Marcus, standing quietly near the chairs. He met her gaze and gave a small nod. "I don't want your life ruined," Angela said finally, turning back to Charlotte. "I want it corrected." Charlotte snapped back. "You don't get to decide that." Angela's eyes hardened. "I already did." Charlotte faltered. Angela continued, her voice steady and unmistakable. "You will acknowledge what happened, publicly. You will stop pretending silence is protection. And you will step down from every position that gave you the power to mistreat people without consequence." Gasps rippled through the guests. Charlotte's face drained of color. "You can't." "I can," Angela said calmly. "And whether you do this willingly determines what comes next." The meaning was clear. Charlotte looked around, at the guests who no longer rallied behind her, at her son who wouldn't meet her eyes, at the woman she had underestimated. For the first time in her life, Charlotte had no leverage. She sat back down slowly. Howard exhaled. Angela turned away from the crowd once more. "This isn't an ending," she said, "and it's a reckoning." She began to walk toward the exit. But this time, no one avoided her. They stepped aside. The wedding never resumed. That fact alone would be remembered for years. Not because vows weren't exchanged or music didn't play, but because a truth had walked onto the lawn and refused to leave quietly. Angela Carter reached the gate at the edge of the property and stopped. The ocean breeze brushed against her skin, cool and grounding. For the first time that day, her shoulders lowered. Behind her, the world she had stepped into and dismantled stood suspended. Howard Robinson watched her from a distance, his tuxedo now feeling like a costume he no longer deserved. The life he had built on avoidance had finally collided with the past, and there was no stepping back into ignorance. "Angela," he called softly. She turned. Howard walked toward her slowly, not with urgency this time, but humility. "I know you don't owe me anything," he said, but before you leave, I need to say this without an audience." Angela studied his face. The fear was gone. What remained was something quieter, accountability. "I'm listening," she said. Howard swallowed. "I spent years telling myself I'd changed, that because I stayed out of trouble, because I built a respectable life, it meant I'd paid my debt." Angela shook her head gently. "Avoiding harm isn't the same as repairing it." He nodded. "I see that now." Howard glanced back at the lawn, where guests stood scattered, unsure what to do next. His bride sat quietly near the altar, her friends beside her, offering comfort without pressure. "I can't undo what happened," he said, "but I can stop pretending it's over." Angela considered him for a long moment. "That's all anyone can do," she said. "Consistency matters more than apologies." Howard took a breath. "I will make this right. With Marcus. With the people I hurt. With my wife." Angela nodded. "And you're already doing more than most." Howard hesitated. "Will you ever forgive me?" Angela looked out at the water. Forgiveness. People treated it like a finish line, like a prize. "It's not something I owe," she said finally, "and it's not something you earn once." Howard accepted that answer. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for telling the truth when silence would have been easier." Angela met his eyes. Silence wasn't easier. It was just familiar. She turned back toward the gate. Behind them, Charlotte Robinson remained seated at the head table, staring at the empty champagne flute in front of her as if it had betrayed her. For the first time in decades, no one rushed to reassure her. No one smoothed things over. No one softened the moment. The women who once mirrored her judgments now avoided her gaze. The men who once nodded along to her quiet cruelty found excuses to step away. Charlotte felt the room withdraw. This, she realized too, late, was what powerlessness felt like. Not punishment, exposure. A few minutes later, Angela felt footsteps beside her. Marcus Lee. He stood quietly, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the horizon. "I didn't know how today would end," he said, "but I'm glad I came." Angela nodded. "So am I." Marcus smiled faintly. "I carried anger for a long time. Thought it would protect me." "And?" Angela asked. "It didn't," he admitted, "but speaking the truth did." Angela placed a hand on his arm briefly. "You didn't owe anyone that." Marcus shrugged. "Maybe not. But I owed it to myself." They stood together in silence, two people bound by a moment that could have destroyed them, but didn't. From the lawn, a voice carried, "Angela." She turned once more. It was Charlotte. The woman approached slowly now, no entourage, no authority in her stride. Her face was drawn, pride cracked down the middle. "I need to understand something," Charlotte said stiffly. "Why didn't you destroy us?" Angela studied her, because she could have. She could have reported everything, exposed every hidden payment, every buried call, every quiet favor that kept the Robinson family afloat when the truth should have sunk them. But she hadn't. "Because destruction doesn't heal what denial broke," Angela said. Charlotte scoffed weakly. "You think this heals anything?" Angela nodded. "It starts something." Charlotte's voice wavered. "You humiliated me." Angela met her gaze steadily. "No, I stood still while the truth caught up to you." Charlotte had no answer for that. Angela continued, her voice calm but unwavering. "You taught your son that protection meant silence. I taught him that mercy requires responsibility." Charlotte looked away. For the first time, there was no comeback. Angela turned back toward the gate. "I hope you choose better going forward," she said. "Not for my sake, for your own." Charlotte watched her walk away, the weight of everything she had lost settling fully onto her shoulders. The wedding guests would leave that estate with a story they would never forget. Some would rewrite it to protect themselves. Some would pretend it never happened. But a few, just enough, would remember the lesson. That day, power didn't shout. It didn't threaten. It didn't humiliate. It waited. And when it spoke, it did so with restraint. Angela Carter reached her car and paused, one last time, looking back at the estate. She didn't feel victorious. She felt free. Free from carrying a truth alone. Free from protecting a lie that was never hers. Free from being invisible. She opened the door and got in. As the car pulled away, the ocean continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to wealth, unmoved by status, constant in its quiet justice. And somewhere behind her, a family learned what it meant when power finally met accountability.